I bring some order into my notes. And go on with Homer and the adaptation of the consonant alphabet into the one and only vowel alphabet by the Greeks. You may have remarked that this is not so unimportant. The names of the letters and the letter forms are the biggest list of Semitic lean words in the whole of ancient Greek. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, and so on. This is, so to say, this is the oriental part, the traditional part, whereas the functioning of the vowels and consonants, as I tried to explain, is quite new and different. And the innovation of all innovations, to put it together in the words of Barry Powell, is that we all can read Greek without understanding. You just have to learn the letters and their phonetic values, and then everybody can read it. For instance, my mother, who was a Greek scholar's daughter, but as a daughter she never learned Greek. But given some lines written by Homer, she had no problem in pronouncing. And now please try this with the Torah or with the Gilgamesh epos or with some hieroglyph, holy text from ancient Egypt, and you see the incredible innovation that this Greek vowel alphabet was and is the first international one, or an alphabet which can be applied step by step to other languages, other cultures, as it has been done through many centuries up to the 19th century, where every African tribe has got its own Bible in its alphabetic printing and writing. This generality can a little bit be sustained by the generality of two Greek inventions, the ink and the calamus pen in English. And we suppose the writing material to have been a papyrus from the start on. But this is difficult to prove because ink bottles and calamuses tend to stay archaeologically, and papyrus doesn't, except in very dry places. The final thing you should never do is imagine these early Greek manuscripts as I date them from 1800 before, in the form of our classical Greek editions done by Oxford or Cambridge or Leib or so. There were, for centuries or for millennia, there were no small letters, just big ones, majuscules. There were no spaces between the words. There were no accents in order to distinguish vowel values. It was just a scriptura continua, an ongoing script, probably just as a support for the voice, because reading in ancient Greece meant reading aloud. Friedrich Nietzsche has made this point ever and ever. again and again. These points are probably well suited to give you an idea how orally based this culture did function, never standing its literalization by the alphabet. If Powell's hypothesis can be held, and I believe so, then Homer was written down in his lifetime, circa 800, before our era, as the first poet to be written down or dictating to this adapter from Semitic to Indo-European sound system. Homer, like all the other bards or rhapsodes, was illiterate, but in the last decade, phonology has been able to do wonderful things on the Iliad. You may have known that Richard Bentley in 1713 discovered the missing letter in the Homeric manuscripts. The missing letter whose introduction made all prosodic problems disappear. If you don't read Oiners for wine, but Oiners for wine with this W at the start, you got the original sound, and this was Richard Bentley's discovery, the gamma. The gamma, double gamma, like W in the English pronunciation. And from Bentley's heroic first lead on, philologists have been able to go back and back into the Iliadic formulas. I don't speak about the Odyssean formulas. And we can ascertain nowadays that in the Iliad, Cretan proper names show up which are older than linear B. So that we come phonetically to an epoch about 1700 before. So incredibly true or faithful. This oral memory of the bards seems to have been. And all the more it remains an enigma why this long-standing relation between the Iliad on the one hand and the Minoan and Mycenaean civilization on the other hand has been totally forgotten or erased or left on the silence. For 400 years, after the destruction of all these Minoan and Mycenaean centers and the rediscovery of the vowel alphabet, there's no sign of signs in Greece anymore, and the only allusion to something like writing, not writing in the strict sense, is a little anecdote in the Iliad, which anecdote deals with baleful signs. You can suppose these are the written signs, you can't be sure. Lucra semina. on the very irritating persistence of Minoan proper names and local names and names of places in the catalogue of ships, second song of the Iliad. I already made my remarks. So I try to give a final touch to this Homeric studies in the Kittlerian sense, if I may say so, because it's rather risky what I do here. I'd say that if Powell is not mistaken, the Iliad is older than the Odyssey, and the Iliad has been dictated by some illiterate poet to somebody who wrote it down with his newly created vocalic alphabet. And let's say 50 years ago, later, 50 years later in 740, 760, somebody, a Homeric, son, maybe a son of Homer, put down the Odyssey in a way where the poet himself was able to read the Iliad and to listen to the effect of the Iliad on its hearers. And so the Odyssey is full of music and singers and nymphs and sirens and every calypso and Kirke, everybody sings and tempts by singing and charms by singing. In the Iliad you just hear the brutal sound of warfare and the cries of dying men. So you could say that the Odyssey is the first self-reflection of European poetry. The Odyssey listens to the prosodic and oral and poetic effect of the Iliad on its newly created hearers and readers. And in the famous case of the two sirens, the song listens to itself. These are it is explicitly said that there are two sirens in order to describe the wonderful event that out of two mouths comes one voice. This is a precise formulation the sirens themselves give of their song. You can imagine an octave or something like this. Two nymphs singing the same song line, one in alto and the other in soprano, as a possible implementation of this duet. And so as we just saw, the sirens invent music, and Kittler invents magic, and Ulysses invents adventure tales and brilliant lies. For instance, the lie that he never entered the Silent Island. And in the line of these heroic or mythical inventors, there also show up inventors of the alphabet. A certain Palamedes, enemy of Ulysses under the conditions of the Trojan War, Prometheus, or Prometheus, as you say probably in the case of Aeschylus, Prometheus, bounded. And these are no gods, half gods, demi-gods, demons, but no gods as such in Egypt or Marduk in Babylon. These are heroic humans and mortals, bringing mortals light, fire, writing, and other constituents of high culture, or culture in general. And on top of all these mythical self-representations of the Greek culture, I see the myth of Cadmus and his wife Harmonia. Cadmus, the Phoenician bringer of the alphabet to Thebes. Harmonia, the mortal daughter of Aphrodite and Ares, that is of love and war. Harmonia as bringing together symphony and dysphony, or musical salvation and musical tension. So I'd say the wedding of Cadmus and Harmonia has been thought as a union of the alphabet and music in general. And that's why this famous wedding on the Cadmeia in Thebes was the last wedding of humans, of mortals, where all the gods and all the muses and all the nymphs showed up and danced with them on the night, the Agora of Thebes. In our days, we expect these wonders in vain. And the only wonder which has been conserved in Paul's words is the Iliad itself. It's probably difficult to explain. We find in the earth, we find in the Greek soil little rotten, half-broken fragments of writing, abecedaria or what else you have, and you take it on the side of the archaeological, epigraphical documentary system. And on the other hand, you have the Iliad, earliest manuscripts about 400, 500 before, no archaeological text, naturally they're not, before this time, and nevertheless, the Iliad and the Odyssey are so verbatim and have undergone so few changes, textual changes in now about 3,000 years, so that we are in some right to put these documentary sources into the monumentary sources, the sources of archaeological materiality. Notwithstanding the fact that the Athenian democracy was very inventive in propagating the idea that Homer had not been written down before the Athenian despot Pisistrates gave the command in 520 about. But let the Athenians lie as they lie. I go on in my most beloved chapter what are these early Greek fragmentary inscriptions we got out of the soil? Abecedaria, proper names, small obscene inscriptions, very interesting. A male name, Ph.D, another male name. This is from the island of Sira, next to the gymnasium. You may imagine why obscene inscriptions and gymnastic inscriptions are the same things. But the overwhelming part of the remaining longer inscriptions are poetic, are done in hexameters, not in any else meter, have nothing to do with political or commercial reasons. Commercial reasons were the most accepted view on the adaptation of the Semitic letters to the Greek culture. I think let's make my argument very short. These philologists who have explained the origin of the Greek vowel alphabet by the by the interests of far commercial sailors and so on, without knowing it, have been slaves of the capitalist ideology. We can't they are just unable to imagine the culture which is more interested in poetry than in commerce. But the early Greeks seem to have been this crazy poetic culture. And I give you just one famous inscription which has some relation to the Odyssey. It was discovered in 1953, I think, on the island of Ischia, Pithecusa, the island of the Apes, in the Gulf of Naples. And this is one jambus and two hexameters, and it runs like this: Nestoros aimi poteron, oi poteron. Wer immer, I am Nestor's cup. Whoever drinks from me will be seized on the spot by the desire of beautifully of well-crowned Aphrodite. Whoever drinks, I should have written it down in this wonderful output. Autica haeretai himeros kalistephanu aphrodites. This is simply the old trinity of wife, wine, and song, and nothing else. And the gag of the thing, Nestor's cup, is shows up in the Iliad and has a height of about 1 meter. And only the hero Nestor can bring it up to his drinking mouth. Whereas this Nestor's cup, so-called Nestor's cup, discovered in a little crate on the island of Ischia, is just Tanya?
Yeah, just this thing. Tiny,
so it's a joke in fun analysis. But an interesting joke, because if you take it by its plain text, it's first quotation in European literature. It's the first intertextual allusion, as post-Structuralists would like to see and say. I'm not so much interested in the history of quotation marks, and so I'm interested in the power of Aphrodite. And in order to bring you near this poetic dimension of these three lines written on Nestor's cup, the second last word, Kalli Stefano Aphrodites, is for the first time written with a double lambda. It's not Kalli Stefano as many old ancient inscriptions would have it, but Kappa Alpha Lambda E Iota would be two open syllables, but we need a closed one for the hexameter. And so Kalli Stefano with double lambda. The text has been written in order to be sung.
Sollen wir es anschreiben? Ich glaube, ich habe es gefunden.
Ja, ich schreibe es nicht sagen. Aus bei mir raus? Oder? Nee, das ist ganz woanders. Das eine müssen wir irgendwie noch reinmachen, das Fältchen oder N. And I will give you a transcription of this very famous fragment, which is almost complete. Just one word is missing and easily replaced or introduced. While Tanya as far as I can see in this global net web representation, which is missing are the separation signs between, not words, but between word groups, which make it, and the separation signs, vertical lines, make it easier to pronounce the text. Saying this, I have to leave the wonderful dimension of earliest Greek poetry and go over to the first methodical reflection on the Greek alphabet done inside Greece herself. But before I do so, just one remark, which is hard to prove, and I still keep point. On the so many half-burned and half-destroyed fragments of the poetess Sappho found in Egypt, I believe to have almost discovered one fragment where she, for the first time, makes the difference between vowels and consonants. So, and this would be natural enough, I'd say, that poets and poetesses are competent by profession for these fundamental distinctions in early Greece: long, short, high, low pitch, consonantal, vocalic, everything. All these prosodic and melodic elements have to be present in order that you can change from the epos, from the hexameter, to the self-invented new melodies, as Sappho invented a Sapphian short line of rhythmical and melodical properties, and other poets, other lines. And so we would be in an open source of writing and typographers, which is you touch on a very heavy commercial and capitalist problem, I think. In order to steal the copyrights from the best European and American font designers, it was sufficient for Adobe and other companies to just change 1 bit or 2 bits, and then the American justice system spoke of an original invention. In truth, it was sheer robbery. And Knuth and others have fight their life long against this kind of intellectual property. Okay, still 3 hours. We'll come into the dimension of marathon and classical race. 42 kilometers to do for me till I break down on the agora of Athens. I announced just a moment ago the first self-application of the Greek alphabet to itself. This is if we stick to our distinction between intercultural and intracultural effects of symbolic systems, we are now in the second case, intracultural, and that's why it's quite difficult to give good historical reasons. But archaeologically, we can be sure that in 588, in southern Italy, in Delia, on the walls of a temple, suddenly the letters of the vocalic alphabet are used as numbers. In a totally conclusive and simple way, alpha becomes 1, beta becomes 2, and so, and a very complicated copper becomes 6, or up the other way around. And so when we come to and we pass from 1 to 9 and got the units with 1 position in modern terminology. And then we come to the iota, and we call the iota 10. And iota, kappa, lambda, and so on. We call them 10, 20, 30, 40, and so on. And we come to 100, and just for a moment I just forgot which was 100, which letter, which alphabetic letter. But there's 1 letter, and then 100, 200, and up to 900. So since about 600 before, the Greeks were able to write the natural numbers from 1 to 999. And no foreign influence can be detected for this self-application, self-reflection of the idea. But it had far-reaching consequences, not only for the Greek culture. And from this double coding of the alphabet, phonetic on the one hand, and numerical, mathematical on the other hand, there arose, I think, the possibility of what the Greeks called, and still call, mathematics. Mathematical activities are very old on this earth. The Greeks were in no way better arithmetically than their predecessors in Babylon or in Memphis, Egypt. But they introduced some generalizations, and the first generalization was this equivalence between sound science and number science. Should we try once again the famous Tetractys? Wieder ein. Tetractys oder Tetractys was the name, something like the fourness. My beloved, or not beloved, my admired teacher, Lacan, called the word Tetractys the first scientific coined word in the history of European science. A word just made up for describing this diagram with all these diagrams, mathematical and musical implications. It's not just a proper name for some 10 little stones, zephoi, calculi in Latin, chart, giving the calculus in English, for instance. But it's the whole structure discovered or described or put free by Pythagoras of Samos when he left his eastern Greek island and went to the far west to southern Italy. And there he or one of his followers, or more than one of his followers, discovered this imperishable system of relationships which the Greek named logoi, relations. It's a plural of logos, the holy word for mind and soul and in general. And you can read it as the musical tuning of a perfect guitar, a Greek kitara, which would give a Spanish or English or Beatles guitar in modern times. And you see in the relation between 1 and 2 on the top, the relation between the fundamental tone and the octave. You see in the relation between this 2 to the 3, the relation between the relation which now we call the fifth, and the relation 3 to 4 we now would call the fourth. And these are, for the Greeks, the fundamental and constant elements in the tuning of the chords of a guitar, of a guitar, and the sounds or tones in between are movable and open to improvisation by the musician. But this mathematical and aesthetical bonework has to be conserved in any or in every case in order to bring together beauty and mathematical order, which the Pythagoreans would call harmonia, as the myth would be true. And from this position on, which may have been reached at last in 500 before, it's easy to see that the Greeks must have developed, they simply developed, out of the same alphabet, two musical notation systems. One quite simple for diatonic movements of human voices, and the second notation system, the same alphabet, but much more complicated. You could turn the letters around by 60 degrees, by 180 degrees. You could, in order to give chromatic values to the guitar or to the aulus playing this score. All these scores were monophonic, needless to say. But we had in fact, how should I call it? It was a perfectly balanced system, just one alphabet and with three applications. Poetic, mathematic, and musical in a more or less strict sense. When Pindar or Aeschylus felt too old to make the long trip from Thebes to Syracuse, they sent their scores, their musical scores, with the poetic text. I wish I could have done the same. And in the following, I'll show you how this unity has been disintegrated step for step by the Romans, by the Christians, and only under conditions of Turing's computer galaxy, we are in a state of the art analog to the Greek one, with our binary system for letters, for pitches, for lines, for equations, for what else? For pixels, for voxels. We can not only handle and manage the different streams of data, but we can convert them one into the other and try out what the sonification of a visual data field would give, and so on and so on. Maybe I exaggerate a little bit for didactic reasons in putting such an emphasis on the unity of the Greek symbol system. There was one and only one thing a priori, so to say, excluded from this Unitarian approach to writing systems. You couldn't play around between geometric diagrams and arithmetical number systems. And algebra was unthinkable under the given options of the Greek numeral system. If every number was written down as a letter, you could not do what we are going to do if we write a power 2 plus b power 2 equals c power 2. Though the only arithmetical generality accessible seems to have been the very fundamental distinction between odd and even numbers. Every number is either odd or even, was the most important and only obviously trivial statement done by philosopher Proton. No Babylonian, no Egyptian ever had seen any reason to separate the whole totality of natural numbers into two classes. But this doing so delivered the first proof that the square root taken out of 2 can't be a number, a natural number, because this number would be at the same time odd and even. This is a very famous result done by Euclides. And odd and even, till late antiquity, plays still a role in conceiving that which is, since Aphrodite's days, the most important issue of Greek culture and life. How about the relation between women and men? Answer, look at the Tetractys. Forget about 1, forget about 4, just look at 2 and 3. 2 as the first even number, 3 as a first odd number, okay? And then if you divide 2 by itself, or if you tear 2 into 2 parts, what do you get in the middle? Nothing. A very, very helpful, very generous nothing. And if you throw apart the 3, what does remain in the middle? A very fertile member. And so it's just a symbol of the sexual act, which the Greeks named gamos. Gamos, to translate gamos by wedding or by marriage would be the most silly translation ever proposed by two library readers. And gamos then is simply the number 5, the relation between 2 and 3. This was to, in order that you don't think I am usual with minor, obscene Greek writers without any importance for the cultural history of Europe. What I quoted was one of the most famous articles written by Plutarchus of Chaeronea, about 120 after the Apud Delphoi. Let me add my mathematical friends. when I told it to them, were shocked in Berlin to see that the Greek mathematics could be equally practical and sexual as the old Chinese one, for instance. But let's go on, and so many hours are still to fill. Whenever you had a look at the ancient Semitic alphabetic signs, you have seen very idiosyncratic and crazy forms, very difficult to memorize, and very asymmetric or unexpected. And if you compare with classical Greek letter forms, you are tremendously surprised. Suddenly, all possible symmetries between these letters, these big letters, not minor ones, have been used and optimized and maximized. And the same goes that it was Pythagoras, once again, himself, who introduced geometry into typography. And in the early classical Attica, the aristocratic agrarian landscape around Athens, the noble families invented a kind of writing system which probably was the optimum or maximum of beauty. Stoichedon style meant that on, let's say, a marble inscription field, the inscription field was invisibly divided into equidistant vertical and horizontal fields, and then in every one of these little grids, one letter, and just only one letter could be put, and it was vertically and horizontally the sheer mixture of typographical beauty and some kind of military terror. The phalanx, all these young soldiers, warriors, in one order, one after the other, one next to the other, all in tact and rhythm, and always victorious against the Spartans and so on. What I try to suggest to you from a very point of view, which among German classical scholars is minoritarian. What I try to suggest is that in the Greek alphabet, the order of the alphabet becomes transparent, diaphane to itself, and after the application to mathematics and to music, why not apply the alphabet to the whole of the universe, the cosmos itself, the physics, that which comes up by itself and goes back into its absence by itself. And so Jesper Svendbro in Paris and I in Berlin, we think that the schematism of the 4 elements as exposed in the big so-called didactic poetry done by Empedocles of Akragas is such a perspective through the alphabet into the stream of nature. And if you look at nature, somehow inspired by Homer's poetry, you see 4 roots for rhizomata, for everything that is. You see the splendor of the sky, which is called Zeus. You see the darkness and the fruitfulness of our Mother Earth, which is called Hera. And Zeus and Hera are a pair of loving and connected gods and goddesses. And if you go on and look, this all was done on the island of Sicily, and then you see the volcano at Etna throwing its underterranean hot fire into the air and having wrapped the most beautiful Chore, nymphae ever living on the island of Sicily. And so Hades, the invisible master of the dead, has seduced Chore, Persephone, and he stands for the hot fire coming from inside the earth, and she stands for the beautiful, warm, sweet water which in Sicily comes out from the same earth. And so two pairs of gods, Zeus and Hera, and Hades and Chore, are both linked as those elementary conditions which later on we formalize as air and earth and fire and water. But for Empedocles, this still is dominated or inspired by the power of goddesses. You have these 2 pairs, heterosexual pairs, but they couldn't have come together without Aphrodite behind them. These are Aphrodite, goddess of law, putting together these pairs, or makers, Ares, Aphrodite's enemy, taking these elements, separating these elements into an unmixed status. And whoever among you still goes on translating philia or philauteis in Empedocles by the English word of friendship has to count with my quote. It's so obvious, sexual love, Aphrodite, nothing to do with Aristotelian friendship. Every night, Aphrodite, philauteis, enters our members, is said in the text. And then we enjoy it. So I will this risky essay to connect the completeness of the Greek alphabetic system with the completeness of the element system. I pass over to the more trivial or more classical example. Sometimes shortly before Platon's or Socrates' days, some philosopher, probably Democritus, went on and replaced the traditional word for letter, the grammar, by an obviously new coined word, stoikaion elementum. Stoichos or stoikos is a step, and stoikain would say step from A to B to C and so on, yeah, in this ordinal dimension of the alphabet. And finally, these so-called atomists, Leucippus and his follower Democritus, proposed the theory that the whole cosmos, universe, is made up of two elements, and only two elements, to atomon and to kanon. The atoma, the atoms, as we have it in English, are the undivisible, last, unvisible, small physical elements of the world, and they are flowing around in some void, the kanon. And that's why they can move around, because this void gives them some open space to move around and not to be fixed like chicken in a chicken farm. And I strongly propose that you take the atomon for the single letter, and I strongly propose that you take the kanon to empty, to void, as the writing material, the empty writing material on which all the letters later begin to dance. And this dance is very nicely described by these atomist philosophers, because they always, many times, like to compare letters to these physical elements, or the other way around. Not all atoma are identical, because the letter alpha is not the letter nu, and in modern writing, and an is not the same syllable as the syllable na, na. You change to two letters and their sequence, and you got the next building block of sense and meaning. And the nicest example is the nu and the z and the zeta. In our case, simply the big N and the big Z. You take the N, you throw it on the back, and you got the Z. And so, for the atomists, every possible combinations of physical beings in the world can be simulated, so to say, by letter combinations in a very in the way of a thought experiment, almost. Before my oral powers miss me, just one famous quotation taken out of like it was, and translated to us by the great Aristotle, and misunderstood totally by Socrates, is stupid. Like it was, tragedy and comedy are made up of the same letters. Chasm, tragical, or if you prefer, a comical effect on all poetic writing we can do. And it's the first philosophical statement on writing which I ever encountered. Not just the relation between the four roots in Empedocles and the letters is not explicit in the philosopher. It needed Jesper Svenbo and my minority to introduce this an analogy, but in Berkeley's phenomenon statement about tragedy and comedy, it's clear without any question that he talks at the same time about things and about science. Les mots et les choses. And the whole tragicomedy of later Hellenistic thought would be the separation between the philosophy of science on the one hand and the almost missing philosophy of things, physics on the other hand.
So maybe we make a break now, it looks like, and we can continue this discussion after.
So we have to come to the issue why the pre-Socratic Greece turned into the so-called classical Greece, how it became possible that Plato and Aristotle dominated our discourse on what is good, and what is sign, what is letter, what is word, what is sentence, what is syllable. To make a long story short, I probably should say in starting that the difference between pre-Socratic and Socratic Greece is the invention of the coin. Now we know electronic money and all this criminal stuff, but at first the coin had to be invented as an exchange medium between different states, cities, and small kingdoms in the Near East. As far as I can tell, the coin started being not a coin, but something like a treasury, like Fort Knox, so to say. The king of Sardis, Lydia, had a big treasury where he piled up his gold, and he put his seal onto this gold barrel, and this was his material power. But in the course of time, this kingdom of Lydia got into far commerce with the Greek polis cities of Ephesus and Smyrna and others, and suddenly these fixed barrels of gold turned into coins and became and got different signifiers, not just the king of Sardis, but Ephesus coined his own coins, and Athens coined its her own. There were no numerical values, as in later in Roman times, inscribed on these coins. It was just the name of the city, abbreviated mostly, alpha, theta, eta for Athens on the foreground face, and the owl, Athene's owl, on the background side. But it was a drachmae, and it was valuable throughout the whole of Greece and in the surrounding Near Eastern kingdoms.
This is why we still speak about carrying out to Athens.
Yeah. Johannes Lohmann, whom I'm so grateful, always stressed the fact that this coin, in its generality, its value throughout Greece, was a tangible, material equivalent of the logos, of the concept of the concept. If you take logos as the concept of the concept, so the nomisma, the money, nomisma, standing for nomos, the law, is some kind of an economic, practical introduction of generality inside the field of economic and political relations. And it has to do, as Tanya made clear, with acts of writing and sealing and coining. And insofar says adieu, bye-bye, to the old Pre-Socratic laws, nomoi, reigning over the Greek polis, cities, which all were unwritten. In Sparta, Lycurgus, the lawgiver, was very proud never to wrote down any law, because written laws you can change, being the subject of the Spartan lawgiver. Unwritten laws you are unable to change, you are bound to them just like charm and fascination and magic. And Lycurgus, before he parted from Sparta to the holy place of the oracle of Delphi, asked his Spartan patriots, compatriots, to swear to keep to these new unwritten laws for the meantime, before he, as long as he would not return from Delphi to Sparta. And this swore it, yeah? But he never came back. He stopped to eat, he stopped to drink, in doing so he put himself into death, and he ordered that his body should be burned to ashes, and the ashes be dissipated on the sea of the Corinthian Gulf. In this way, the Spartans could never physically manipulate Lycurgus' dead body and change the value of the unwritten laws. I just told you this in remembrance to the tragedy and to Antigone, and to her saying that the nomoi agraptoi, the unwritten laws, are much older and much more powerful than all the commands issued by the crazy tyrant named Raven. So to see the least, the Greeks' attitude to writing was ambiguous. Literacy probably was most developed at Athens, since Solon, the lawgiver of Athens, put on the marketplace turnable wooden tablets where his, Solon's laws were inscribed, and everybody could read them. The reason for this readability was following Solon, a democracy. And as everybody of you knows, this Athenian democracy culminated in the practice of the ostracismos. All the citizens of Athens, that is all the grown men minus the women, Androi, Athenaioi, were called together and proposed the question whether one famous soldier or politician should be allowed to stay in the city or go away from 10 years without loss of property and so on. And everybody was allowed to write down his opinion on a little fragment of ceramic. And we have found many of them, these Ostracismoi, these Scherbengerichte, these and many of these, for instance, in the case of the famous strategist Themistocles, there has been found in the soil a whole nest of ostracismic fragments, ceramic fragments, all written by the same hand. So it was prepared by some political party to throw him out. And the so-called degree of literacy in classical Greece was not so big as, let's say, George Bush would like to have it. It would take a much too long time to demonstrate you the long and systematical change from a musical education of the young to an alphabetic and grammatical education of these young, especially boys. I've written my last book on issues like these, and unfortunately MIT Press has shown no interest in these old Greek questions, although in my eyes they are very technical, just also technical like any decision of software engineering these days. We learn from this alphabetic Paideia education system that the fully analytical power of the alphabet was not applied to the young girls and boys and maybe probably girls. That you didn't learn A, B, C and so on, but rather Ba, Baby, Bohu, as in the case of the Minoan Jinyabi. This is much more easier for children than the final analysis into last for names and signifiers. And only philosophers, I should say, and try to say, any interesting parallel event?
We are doing another kind of lesson.
Oh?
No, it's in the next one.
Yeah.
We are doing another kind of course.
Yeah, another kind.
Another kind.
Yeah. Quite another kind.
I don't know how kind it is, but
Stress for me, really. But if you try to, okay, before we start deconstructing Plato himself, in a way quite different from Derrida's way. Okay, I give you my four-liner, that was most famous four-liner. Maybe it's a fragment and was originally a part of a poem much longer than 4 lines. But my friend Jasper Sevendro has asked me, Friedrich, could you think of any continuation of these 4 lines? And I was compelled to answer, no, yes, but I don't see no continuation at all. The poem is perfect. And now you may hear it. You should know that this before hearing the Ionic dialect of Sappho, it's probably nice to know that in her dialect there was no age. There was no spiritus aster, no Semitic or roughness in language. And so this poem goes, Deduken men azelanna, taple iliades mesta de nuptai, para derke tora ego dimona kathoito. And stop. And Deduken men azelanna. It's not Selene, as it would in Attic or Ionian dialect. It's Azelana. The
Rungos.
Yeah, sure, but now we have to compete with James Joyce and other, and T.S. Eliot, and make something beautiful out of Asalana. In Hollywood's Boris would write Dämonin, at least in his German translation. In English? I shouldn't be too ritual about these 4 lines. The Dune female has something, yeah, under the sea, probably, because it's a poem written on an island. And the Pleiades in the Pleiades too, the famous 7 stars, whose disappearance announces winter time and Saas-Fee, coldness and ice and so on. Para Verke Dora, maybe the hour goes by. This may mean this is the last ontological property of human life, that it goes by. But it may also mean I had a date for that, and he or she didn't show up. Ego demona catoido. But I sleep or have to sleep alone. Mona is a feminine form. Sappho speaks about herself, about her body, about her sleeping alone. Which is the tweet which I feel most touching is the absence of any metaphor or allegory. It's just everyday or every night experience, and so simple and so rhythmical, and so let's do it again. Pero que menna selana, Pleiades mesa de nuptae, para Verke Dora, ego demona cateodo. Unfortunately, the glory and the power and the magic of European poetry was at the beginning with Homer and Sappho and Sophocles, and has left it more and more. If you compare James Joyce's Ulysses with Homer, the Odyssey, you won't hesitate which to prefer.
Maybe we should point out that Sappho is also important to this lecture because she herself was writing about the difference between vowels and consonants. So
I said it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think you did.
I suggested that, to my best knowledge, she was the first to distinguish between phoneenta and aphona, between sounding speech elements, vocals, vowels, phoneenta, and aphona, soundless, consonantic. You should, as my time and your time is limited, thanks to the gods, I can't do everything I'd like to do. So if you come back to Italy or New York City, or you have to have a look at St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 14, and then you will find these fundamental two concepts: phoneenta, da phoneenta, the vowels, and da aphona, the consonants, as generalized concepts for the Christian faith and practice. Nothing on earth is aphonon, St. Paul writes. Nothing on earth is just consonantic. I should criticize this famous phrase by saying, okay, one thing is certainly consonantic, and this thing is called Yahweh. But we have to work. Before Tanya spelled me to to come back to Sappho and the silence, I said that usually the Athenian young boys, before that are introduced into pederastic relations with elder men, were introduced to reading and writing and singing by sequences such as ba baby bo boo, ga baby bo boo, and so on until infinity. And this is the real stuff from which Plato organizes his etymological treatise called Rhetilus. And Derrida is so mistaken in his famous long interpretation, the pharmacy of Plato, that I should simply make the most simple argument. General idea of Plato is every noun, especially, there are also verbs, but nouns are more important. Every noun has a natural meaning, significance. In some nouns, in some cases of nouns, you can really read it. If you have the noun to beta, you know that the letters eta, theta, alpha don't tell us much, but the sound of beta, of be, is indispensable for to beta, the name, the alphabetic name of the second letter in the Greek alphabet. And so to theta and to alpha, these are approximations of the idea, philosophical name, where the thing and the symbol coincide. But then, concludes Socrates, there are 4 nouns in the Greek language where this identity between sense and sound is perfect. And these are to o, to o, to I, to e, to e. I think I just improvised 5 and then later it's only 4. That is to say, before the Greeks introduced letter names like iota or omega or omicron, they had just the name to o for the short o and to o for the long o. And in these 4 cases, Platon's ideal of identity was really implemented, and that's why the language and script discussed in Platon's Rhetilus and Platon's Philebus and Platon's Phaedrus have nothing to do with Egypt and the god Thoth, but in all 3 cases with the volcanic richness of the Greek alphabet. And Derrida, being a Jewish philosopher of French language in an Arab context, I just quoted him, won't or didn't accept this. His lifelong he fought for an alphabet without any pronunciation, without any sayability. He opted, without saying so, for the Hebrew alphabet against the Greek one. Everybody is free to do so or not so, but you should put your cards on the table, and you didn't. Somebody will learn elementary German and read my 2nd volume, and discover my friendly fight with him. In passing, I just mention that this idea of identity created by Plato didn't simply transform the concept of letters, but even that of the gods. And this was, as you may imagine, worse. But in fact, the Platonic gods and goddesses, if there were goddesses anymore, acted and reacted just like Platonic letters. They stayed identical to themselves under every, let's say, geometric transformation. God, one God probably, only one God, is his idea. His idea is just one and can't be and can't change. So if the idea can't change in time, the God can't change. The God has no chance to transform himself into a swan, into an ox, into an eagle, or into pouring rain in order to love some Leda or Alcmene or all these beautiful young pre-Socratic princesses running over Greece. And the God is so to say arrested in his morphe, in his shape, in his visible shape as in his conceptual shape. And if he doesn't behave this way, he must be corrected. Given all these metamorphoses that Homer and other poets have ascribed to the gods, all these becoming bears and boars and eagles and so on, these events have to be thrown out from experience and put into mythology or explained away by allegoric fidgeting around. The God is heaven, and the goddess beneath him is earth, and so they are in some Platonic right to see one or the other. This oblivion of the literal sense of the text, this transgression into metaphysical, idealistic readings, didn't stop with the Greeks or the Romans or the Stoics. It went on more and more heavy with the early Christians, and so we are born from an allegoric culture inside which the idea that the gods did make law at both ends is simply unacceptable. Because, nevertheless, it's the most elementary truth ever produced without the gods making love and our parents making love. Nobody of us would sit here on this table. So after all these Platonic Verehrungen,
writing lost?
After all these Platonic aberrations, it's a pleasure to come back to his crude and prosaic student Aristotle from Stagaira. Who was the first one, so to say, to build up a theory of writing, which I may short up in difference to my notes. What troubles Aristotle most is this combinatorial status of syllables and words. You have AN or NA, you have BA or AB, and both syllables have different meanings, bar and up. And how this comes, this is his most, I think, terrifying and quite simple question, which has to do with this lifelong struggle from materiality to shape, to idols, from matter to visible and recognizable form in this world. And so, for instance, in the chapter 20 of the Poetics, Aristotle makes a long course from the single letter of the Greek alphabet through the syllables to the nouns and verbs to the phrase, to the logos, up to the logos, where the sense is finally revealed. And letters are matter relating to syllables as form. That is, syllables are more formal, more eidetic, more intellectual or intelligible than sounds. And at the same time, the syllables are less intelligent and less eidetic than words, so that letter to syllable equals syllable to word, and this is a very unkind mathematical relation into which Aristotle didn't enter what I did. The point about all this relation between matter and form, which are fundamental concepts dominating each of our everyday papers and writing and essays, and it's terrible how powerful Aristotle has influenced our terminology. And all this has to do with the impossible and search for the difference between singing, speaking, and writing. You all know probably Aristotle's remark from the beginning of the Politics that mankind is the only zoon, logon, echon, the only animal which has the logos to speech, the power to speak. Okay, he never revokes this sentence, but logos is not so far away from dialectos, which is dialect, verbatim, and which is a power of the mouth to articulate itself in meaningful, different syllables. This is not the job of cows and oxes when they moo and so on. But this is the case of nightingales. Nightingales, for Aristotle, can sing because their singing is not a natural gift, but has been learned from younger male nightingales by older ones, and some nightingales learn many songs, and others learn few. And the difference between human children and young nightingales tends to zero in my lecture. And if we ask which remaining, the difference still remains, or which Aristotle is unable to write down the simple phrase, nightingales don't whine. In my knowledge, it was only William S. Burroughs in the Electronic Revolution who stated that a very brilliant, smart old rat nevertheless can't publish an article in the Real Digest how young, unexperienced rats avoid human traps. The old rat is wonderfully brilliant, but writing isn't his best. And this implicit graphematic distinction between nightingales, dialectus, and logos, speech, on the other hand, coincides with Aristotle's differentiation between vocal or oral symbols of experiences, patimata, and written ones. Every people and every humans and every people make the same experiences, patimata. But all of them turn these experiences into different sounds. Persian sounds, Greek sounds, Latin sounds, and so on. And these sounds are symbolized for a second time by different writing systems as Greek or Latin, and so on. And so only the experiences are interculturally constant. There is no feedback between thought and script. There's no explanation of Hellenistic polyglottism, which nevertheless exploded at Aristotle's time, when every Alexandrian Jew learned the Greek as a second language, and every cultivated Roman had to learn Greek. And in order to last fatal sentence on Aristotle and his fateful or baleful influence on the cultural tradition of our culture. Sorry for the pleonasm. Aristotle and his many specialized students during his lifetime and after his lifetime had the prominent job of selecting the manuscripts going by ship to the two big Hellenistic libraries of Alexandria in Egypt and Pergamon in Asia Minor. And some devilish imp in Aristoteles or his followers has arranged things so that in no one of all these thousands of manuscripts and papyrus rolls, there's one musical song anymore. We have the texts of Sophocles and much more text from Euripides and text and the whole and they have no the whole musical notation system would have been lost if not in the course of the 19th century some marble inscriptions did show up, which have been transcribed and deciphered. So the end of Greece is the beginning of both. Tanya? Should we reflect on the second small pause? Or?
It's 6 o'clock. Maybe we do a small pause and then we continue to 7.
Sure.